Hi, guys. Hello, hello. How is it going? Not too bad, I hope. This is nerve-wracking. um, but hello, hello. Welcome to my first stream. Welcome to my debut. I'm gonna go ahead and start out with the model showcase. I spent a very, very long time on this. Um, but I think he turned out pretty okay for my first try. He moves pretty well, and then look at the clothes. He. It's all swishy and stuff. And then you can zoom out to see the full thing. I haven't figured out how to get the tails to come up all the way, but that's okay. We'll figure it out. It'll come with time. um, but yeah, I think he moves pretty well. You know. Um, we don't have toggles yet. I'm working on that currently. Um, in my defense, this is the first model that I've ever made. So he's a little bit scuffy. As you can see, the hair kind of clips into the face a bit. But you know what? That just adds to the aesthetic. That's the excuse I'm going with anyway. Don't don't worry about it. Just don't look too closely. um oh yeah, but he bounces too. See? Ta-da, and then I can turn and bounce and you can see kind of like the heels down here go up and stuff. Eh. And then I can turn the other way and bounce like this too. This was hard to figure out, but I think he turned out okay. Yeah. And then the tail swish in the background. And I'm really proud of this, but look, you can see kind of like the shadow behind the body where the tails are swishing. So it's it adds to that extra 3D element. It just makes my brain happy anyway. But yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. And check out the sleeves. I think the sleeves turned out pretty okay. A little bit scuffy, but again, my first model. Um, the pattern on the sleeve, also moves to kind of help give it, the illusion, that it's not just one flat image. Uh, yeah. This model took, um, an entire month and a half of ADHD meds, which was, yeah, yeah. Anyway, um, how are you guys doing? I got a little nervous, so I just kind of started talking right away. Um, I'm currently drinking foxglove tea. It's very nice. I don't recommend it for most people. Please do not drink this at home, but I enjoy it. It won't kill me, but um, yeah. Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and get started with the presentation then. Um, isn't that poisonous? For you it is. Yeah, that's why I said don't drink it at home. Don't try this at home, kids. It's poisonous for you. It's fine for me. I'm good. I'm Gucci. We're doing great out here. Also, hello, Ginkgo. Don't don't good god me. um, hello, Ginkgo. Thank you for making it to the stream. I very much appreciate it. Hi. uh, um, yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and get started with our little debut presentation. Pew 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 pew. Yeah, just give me 1 second to transition. Bloop. Yeah. How does that look? Am I in a good spot? I'll move up a bit. Boop. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Okay, so hello. I am Lorem Ipsum. You can call me Laura for short. Um, I have been called a silly little guy by expert sources. Those expert sources may or may not just be my roommate, who is currently still asleep, and I really hope I'm not waking him up. But you know, he is sleeping until like 3:14 in the afternoon. Anyway, I use he/him pronouns. I am not short. Don't look at that. I'm 78. I only speak English, but I do have. I have been intending to learn more languages for the past like 5 years. It'll happen eventually. Um, I am some kind of monster doll amalgamation thing. You know, funky little guy. And my birthday is April 19th. Okay? And now I just have to figure out where I put the rest of this presentation. Don't worry about it. There's page 2. So the things that I like are jellyfish and my cats. And I meant to put 2 pictures of my cats up here. Um, I guess I forgot to do that. Anyway, my cats' name are Howl and Solomon. They are both. Where are they? Howl is right here behind me on my bed. He's very, very cute, very soft. I love him. You'll hear me talk about him a lot. I don't know where Solomon is. Probably trying to eat paper mache again. I also really like tea and food, um, and rain. Rain is very nice. I like it when it's raining outside, and I just get to like listen to it. It's like, oh, it's so nice. And then any kind of narrative art. I wrote narrative art there, hoping that it wouldn't sound like too pretentious, but also not having like a good word for like just literally anything related to storytelling, including, books, but also comics and like media, and other stuff like that, which, you'll see in a second. As for dislikes, vague yet menacing government agencies. Don't like that. Strong smells, and asparagus. I hate asparagus. I think it is the worst vegetable. It should not exist. It's a bad decision. It's not good. There's nothing you can do to make asparagus good. It's just bad. Anyway, um, so these are some of my favorite shows and manga. No, don't shut up. No, asparagus bad. No, asparagus bad. Stop. I will not be having this argument in my chat. Get out of here. Banned. I'm kidding. But some of my favorite mangas are Jubaku Shonen Hanako-kun, Princess Jellyfish, The Cat Proposed. It's very good. If you haven't read it, it's kind of more of a niche one, but I highly recommend it. It makes my little brain happy anyway. The Adventure Zone. I absolutely love Carrie's artwork. It's so good. It's so good. I'd love to do like a deep dive into how she lays out like panels and different transition scenes and stuff, and also, I don't know, being able to like watch her art improve from like the first volume to like the most recent one that's come out. It's really cool. Same with Hanako, actually. I'd love to be able to do like just a like an analysis of it, analyzing like the panels specifically, because I love the way that the panels are done in Hanako. Salchi's Monstrous Appetite is another one, that's kind of niche, but I really like it. It's really cute. It's about this guy who likes to cook and, just a girl with a big appetite. And there's definitely no horror involved. It's just a cute little romance. There's no horror in this. Don't look too closely. Oh, and then, oh yeah, and Astro Boy. I'm a big Astro Boy fan. I like it a lot. Makes brain happy. It's also just, a really big part of manga and comic history. Oh, and then Twin Peaks and Gravity Falls. You know, my own storytelling, I think, takes quite a bit of inspiration from this. If you haven't seen it already, then you're going to. That's what we call subtle foreshadowing. um, oh, yeah, and these are some of my favorite books. We have The Hobbit, of course, J.R. Tolkien, kind of, you know, not very original, but, it's good. Howl's Moving Castle, which we will be reading today. I'll be reading at least, the first couple of chapters. Carry On by Rainbow Rowell is another one of my favorites. Same with The Last Unicorn. The King in Yellow is one of my favorites. I don't know why. I just like it. It just makes my brain happy. Also a big Shirley Jackson fan. The Stars Did Wonder, Darkling, by Colin Malloy. Colin Malloy is actually the guy who wrote, if you haven't read this one yet, he's the guy who wrote the Wildwood series, which Leica is currently making another stop motion film on Wildwood, which I'm very excited about. Leica should hire me at some point, please. I would be great. Mexican Gothic is another really good one. You know, I really want to read that one on stream too, because I like that one a lot. And then next is video games. So we have kind of a running theme here with the indie RPG horror stuff, which is another thing that I'd like to do, like on stream, is learning how to use RPG Maker and then hopefully making a game with you guys. I think that would be really cool. But I'll talk more about that later. Then there's, let's see, I haven't finished Eastward yet, but I'm working on it. And then, Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, I feel like, that one's pretty popular, so that one's not very surprising. One Shot holds a special place in my, a special place in my heart. Same with Yuppie Psycho. I guess there's some niche ones in here. If you guys are interested, maybe we could play it on stream and do like a little, I don't know, analysis of it, I guess. I like doing art analysis, especially when it comes to like color and stuff. Maybe that would be interesting. I don't know if, but yeah. And then ta-da. So when it comes to music and stuff, I kind of listen to a variety of just mostly background music, I guess. There's not really, I mean, the only two artists I can really think of that I listen to like on a regular basis would be A Crowd of Rebellion and Willwood. I might be a little gay. Just a little bit. And then I also put down some like ARGs and like internet storytelling stuff down here because I like that too. But we have Mystery Flesh Pit National Park, Gilbert Garfield. I love that one. It's so weird. Vitas Carnis. That one's really cool. I absolutely love the puppetry on it. Like the puppets they made for it. It's sick. Oh, shoot. I forgot to add, what was it? Welcome Home? I think that's it. Yeah, Welcome Home. That's another one of my favorites. I forgot to add that on here. Now I'm kind of sad. But Angel Hair is on here too. Angel Hair is another really good one. I don't remember if that one actually has any ARG elements to it, if it's just like an internet series. Yeah. Anyway, next we have the lore. Yes, help was ja uit waha rolway if nil ups the no get even on me and we such wab law of the girl of said cash knock and yeah no it we see do me here if it ask we are or swap one night wah ngol said the in what we get me let's net if you're one me Rep the meme of it but yeah, so that's basically my backstory. As for stream plans, we have well, books, of course. I'm planning on streaming every Thursday around 3 p.m. Um, Not like a different book each time. Like I do want to read all of House Moving Castle with you guys, and then move on to like a different book after that. The Goth Girl Dating Sim is the video game that I was referencing before. I'd love to make a Goth Girl Dating Sim together. I think that would be both hilarious and a lot of fun. Um, I do have some characters planned out for it, with like varying different aesthetics. Like if we do actually make this game together, um, I will be talking a lot about fashion history because I like fashion history. It makes brain happy. Um, oh, and then also like the music, like behind it, because the music history actually behind like the goth scene is actually really really fascinating. I went on a bit of a rabbit hole about that the other day. Um, I really really want to do like a full like Omori analysis. Uh, so when we play that together, I will be stopping like every 5 seconds to take notes about every little like thing, and like specifically like the art palette, art palette, the color palette, the color palette, um, the specific music that's used because there's a lot of leitmotifs that are used throughout. And I'm gonna need to take note of that. And then also the specific wording that is used throughout it. So if we play that together, it'll be a lot of me stopping to take notes. For my schedule, the plan is to do reading on Thursdays, illustration stream on Fridays. So on Friday at like 4, um, we'll go back. Well, we won't, I mean, so on Fridays at 4, we'll do like some illustrations based off of the chapters that we just read on Thursday. Um, so like, today we'll probably get through maybe like the first probably couple of chapters. Oh, hi Solomon. Boop boop. That was my cat. Um, so we'll probably get through the first maybe like chapter or two of House Moving Castle, and then on Friday we'll come back and then we'll draw a little bit of it. Um, and then Saturday is dedicated to just kind of anything, It's just a little free day, a little day to have fun. So this Saturday, we're going in the Hypnagogic Archive, which is, I think it's an ARG. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is an ARG, but it's one that I haven't really explored yet, and I'd love to do that. Yeah. As for goals, we have, I really want to do collabs. I'd love to meet other, streamers and like collab with them. I think that would be a lot of fun. Um, I also want to try to figure out how to do Discord nights. I know that's a thing that you can do, is to just like stream like movies or something and then watch them together. I think that'd be fun. Um, I really, really want to play like Demonologist or Phasmophobia with somebody. I think that, I don't know, I watch collabs of it a lot, and I'd like to, I don't know, do some myself. I think that would be fun. There's also like that duck murder game, with the geese. It's I don't know much about it. It just kind of looks like Among Us, but like with the ducks, and I think that sounds fun. um, we do have some follower goals. Um, so once I become like a partner, I think I should be able to add more interactivity stuff. So like more chat things. I do have emotes. I just cannot add them yet. But once we get to like I think 10 followers, I think we're 3 away, which is very exciting. Um, but yeah, once we get there, I should be able to actually add more emotes that the chat can use, that you guys can use, my little booklets. Yeah. Um, yeah. And then you can find me on Twitter and YouTube and, here, obviously, but you're already here, so you know where that is. And I also have a Ko-fi. So if you want to commission me for anything or just give me money, you can do that there. um, but yeah, I'll be posting up all of the VODs onto YouTube. I also posted my debut announcement video up there. On Twitter, I am semi-active on. I am doing my best. I am not. I'm not used to using Twitter. It's it's a new concept. It's a new thing. Yeah. For credits, yeah, it was just me. I did all of the background stuff for this presentation, for the model you see here, for the design, the different like emotes that you'll see eventually, the different backgrounds. Yeah. Um, but I mean, there were like, I didn't like learn live to do by myself. I did watch tutorials, and that was by Kira Omori, Chupuko, and Kat Athenia, who you can find. You can find all of them on YouTube, and you can find all of their tutorials there as well. And I highly recommend them. They were very nice to watch anyway. And yeah, that's it for the debut. For the debut presentation. And now I'm going to switch over here. Ta-da! But yeah, see, like I made the whole background for this. And now I'm just going to I'm going to zoom in and you guys can see me better. But yeah, I made the whole background for this. If you guys recognize this room at all, this definitely isn't just the top floor in Animal Crossing. Don't look too closely. And yep, don't worry about it. Oh. But that was a bit of a long presentation. I want to check in. How are you guys doing? Checking the chat again to make sure I didn't miss anything, and I don't think I did. Asparagus is still bad. I stand by that. Oh, thank you. Yeah. Okay. You guys ready to read, like... Actually, before we get into reading, I'm gonna take a few sips of my tea real quick. Because I've been talking for a lot, and I'm not really used to that just yet. I will be, eventually. How's your day been going so far? I kind of woke up today really, really late. My hair is still wet from the shower. I showered for the stream and nobody can even see. It's kind of breaking immersion a little bit. That's okay. But yeah, my day's been going all right so far. Okay. You guys ready to get into House and Castle? Let me just flip to the right page. All right. Chapter 1, in which Sophie talks to hats. Actually, let me adjust this real quick. Can you guys still hear me all right? I don't want to get too quiet because I'm going to be looking down while I'm reading this a bit. I'm going to adjust my mic real quick. Boop. All right. Chapter 1, in which Sophie talks to hats. In the land of Ingary, where such things as 7-league boots and cloaks of invisibility really exist, it is quite a misfortune to be born the eldest of 3. Everyone knows you are the one who will fail first and worse, if the 3 of you set out to seek your fortunes. Sophie Hatter was the eldest of 3 sisters. She was not even the child of a poor woodcutter, which might have given her some chance of success. Her parents were well-to-do and kept a lady's hat shop in the prosperous town of Market Chipping. True, her own mother died when Sophie was 2 years old, and her sister Letty was 1 year old, and their father married his youngest shop assistant, a pretty blonde girl named Fanny. Fanny shortly gave birth to the 3rd sister, Martha. This ought to have made Sophie and Letty into ugly sisters, but in fact all 3 grew up to be very pretty indeed, though Letty was the one everyone said was the most beautiful. Fanny treated all 3 girls with the same kindness and did not favor Martha in the least. Mr. Hatter was proud of his 3 daughters and sent them all to the best school in town. Sophie was the most studious. She read a great deal and very soon realized how little chance she had of an interesting future. It was a disappointment to her, but she was still happy enough, looking after her sisters and grooming Martha to seek her fortune when the time came. Since Fanny was always busy in the shop, Sophie was the one who looked after the younger 2. There was a certain amount of screaming and hair-pulling between those younger 2. Letty was by no means resigned to being the one who, next to Sophie, was bound to be the least successful. "It's not fair," Letty would shout. "Why should Martha have the best of it just because she was born the youngest? I shall marry a prince, so there." To which Martha always retorted that she would end up disgustingly rich without having to marry anybody. Then Sophie would have to drag them apart and mend their clothes. She was very deft with her needle. As time went on, she made clothes for her sisters too. There was one deep rose outfit she made for Letty the May Day before the story really starts, which Fanny said looked as it had come from the most expensive shop in Kingsbury. About this time, everyone began talking of the Witch of the Waste again. It was said the witch had threatened the life of the king's daughter, and that the king had commanded his personal magician, Wizard Solomon, to go to the waste and deal with the witch. And it seemed that Wizard Solomon had not only failed to deal with the witch, he had gotten himself killed by her. So when, a few months after that, a tall black castle suddenly appeared on the hills above Market Chipping, blowing clouds of black smoke from its 4 tall, thin turrets, everybody was fairly sure that the witch had moved out of the waste again and was about to terrorize the country the way she used to 50 years ago. Excuse me. People got very scared indeed. Nobody went out alone, particularly at night. What made it all the scarier was that the castle did not stay in the same place. Sometimes it was a tall black smudge on the moors to the northwest. Sometimes it reared above the rocks to the east, and sometimes it came right downhill to sit in the heather only just beyond the last farm to the north. You could see it actually moving sometimes, with smoke pouring out from the turrets in dirty gray gust. For a while, everyone was certain that the castle would come right down into the valley before long, and the mayor talked of sending to For a while, everyone was certain that the castle would come right down into the valley before long, and the mayor talked of sending to the king for help. The castle stayed roving about the hills, and it was learned that it did not belong to the witch, but to Wizard Howl. Wizard Howl was bad enough, though he did not seem to want to leave the hills. He was known to amuse himself by collecting young girls and sucking the souls from them. Or some people said he ate their hearts. He was an utterly cold-blooded and heartless wizard, and no young girl was safe from him if he caught her on her own. Sophie, Letty, and Martha, along with all the other girls in market shipping, were warned never to go out alone, which was a great annoyance to them. They wondered what use Wizard Howl found for all the souls he collected. They had other things on their minds before long, however, for Mr. Hatter died suddenly, just as Sophie was old enough to leave school for good. It then appeared that Mr. Hatter had been altogether too proud of his daughters. The school fees he had been paying had left the shop with quite heavy debts. The funerals over, Fanny sat down in the parlor in the house next door to the shop and explained the situation. "You'll have to leave that school, I'm afraid," she said. "I've been doing sums back and front and sideways, and the only way I can see to keep the business going and take care of the three of you is to see you all settled in a promising apprenticeship somewhere. It isn't practical to have you all in the shop. I can't afford it. So this is what I've decided. Letty first." Letty looked up, glowing with health and beauty which even sorrow and black clothes could not hide. "I want to go on learning," she said. "So you shall, love," said Fanny. "I've arranged for you to apprentice at Cesari's, the pastry cook in Market Square. They have a name for treating their learners like kings and queens, and you should be very happy there, as well as learning a useful trade. Miss Cesari's is a good customer and a good friend, and she's agreed to squeeze you in as a favor." Letty laughed in the way that showed that she was not at all pleased. "Well, thank you," she said. "Isn't it lucky that I like cooking?" Fanny looked relieved. Letty could be awkwardly strong-minded at times. "Now, Martha," she said, "I know you're full young to go out to work, so I've thought round for something that would give you a long, quiet apprenticeship and go on being useful to whatever you decide to do after that. You know my old school friend, Annabelle Fairfax?" Martha, who was slender and fair, fixed her big gray eyes on Fanny almost as strong-mindedly as Letty. "You mean the one who talks a lot?" she said. "Isn't she a witch?" "Yes, with a lovely house and clients all over the Folding Valley," Fanny said eagerly. "She's a good woman, Martha. She'll teach you all she knows and very likely introduce you to grand people she knows in Kingsbury. You'll be all set up in life when she's done with you." "She's a nice lady," Martha conceded. "All right." Sophie, listening, felt that Fanny had worked everything out just as it should be. Letty, as the second daughter, was never likely to come to much, so Fanny had put her where she might meet a handsome young apprentice and live happily ever after. Martha, who was bound to strike out and make her fortune, would have witchcraft and rich friends to help her. As for Sophie herself, Sophie had no doubt what was coming. It did not surprise her when Fanny said, "Now, Sophie, dear, It seems only right and just that you should inherit the hat shop when I retire, being the eldest as you are. So I've decided to take you on as apprentice myself, to give you a chance to learn the trade. How do you feel about that? Sophie could hardly say that she simply felt resigned to the hat trade. She thanked Fanny gratefully. So that's settled then, Fanny said. The next day, Sophie helped Martha pack her clothes in a box, and the morning after that, they all saw her off in the carrier's cart, looking small, upright, and nervous. For the way to Upper Folding, where Miss Fairfax lived, lay out over the hills past Wizard Howl's moving castle. Martha was understandably scared. She'll be all right, said Letty. Letty refused all help with the packing. When the carrier's cart was out of sight, Letty crammed all her possessions into a pillowcase and laid the neighbor's boot boy 6 pence to wheel it in the wheelbarrow to Cesari's in Market Square. Letty marched behind the wheelbarrow, looking much more cheerful than Sophie expected. Indeed, she had the air of shaking the dust off the hat shop off her feet. The boot boy brought back a scribbled note from Letty, saying that she had put up her things in the girls' dormitory at Cesari's, and it seemed great fun. A week later, the carrier brought a letter from Martha to say that Martha had arrived safely and that Miss Fairfax was a great dear who uses honey with everything. She keeps bees. And that was all Sophie heard of her sisters for quite a while, because she started her own apprenticeship the day Martha and Letty left. Sophie, of course, knew the hat trade quite well already. Since she was a tiny child, she had run in and out of the big work shed across the yard, where the hats were damped and molded on blocks, and flowers and fruit and other trimmings were made from wax and silk. She knew the people who worked there. Most of them had been there when her father was a boy. She knew Bessie, the only remaining shop assistant. She knew the customers who brought the hats and the man who drove the cart which fetched raw straw hats from the country to be shaped on the blocks in the shed. She knew the other suppliers and knew how you felt for winter hats. There was not really much that Fanny could teach her, except perhaps the best way to get a customer to buy a hat. You lead up to the right hat, love, Fanny said. Show them the ones that won't quite do first, so they know the difference as soon as they put the right one on. In fact, Sophie did not sell hats very much. After a day or so of observing in the workshed, and another day going around the clothier and the silk merchants with Fanny set her to trimming hats. Sophie sat in a small alcove at the back of the shop, sewing roses to bonnets and veiling to velours. I don't know what this is. I'll look it up when we get to a stopping point. Lining all of them with silk and arranging wax, fruit, and ribbons stylishly on the outsides. She was good at it. She quite liked doing it. But she felt isolated and a little dull. The workshop people were much too old to be much fun. Besides, they treated her as someone apart who was going to inherit the business someday. Bessie treated her the same way, and Bessie's only talk anyway was about the farmer she was going to marry the week after May Day. Sophie rather envied Fanny and velour, a kind of fabric. Yeah, that checks out. Thank you. Where was I? Oh, there it is. Sophie rather envied Fanny, who could bustle off to bargain with the silk merchant whenever she wanted. The most interesting thing was the talk from the customers. Nobody can buy a hat without gossiping. I gotta say, that is kind of fun about working in retail. Oh, thank you. I'm glad that you're enjoying it. I think next time I'm going to add some rain sounds in the background. You know, make it a bit more cozy. Sophie sat in her alcove and stitched and heard that the mayor would never eat green vegetables, and that how... Oh wait, that's just like my roommate. My roommate never eats anything Like green. I don't know how he does it. Anyway, and heard that the mayor would never eat green vegetables, and that Wizard Howl's castle had moved round to the cliffs again. Really, that man. Whisper, whisper, whisper. The voices always dropped low when they talked of Wizard Howl, but Sophie gathered that he caught a girl down in the valley last month. Bluebeard, said the whispers, and then became voices again to say that Jane Ferrier was the perfect disgrace, the way she did her hair. That was one who would never attract even Wizard Howl, let alone a respectable man. Then there would be a fleeting, fearful whisper about the Witch of the Waste. Sophie began to feel that Wizard Howl and the Witch of the Waste should get together. They seemed to be made for one another. Someone ought to arrange a match, she remarked to the hat she was trimming at that moment. But by the end of the month, the gossip in the shop was suddenly all about Letty. Cesare's, it seemed, was packed with gentlemen from morning to night, each one buying quantities of cakes and demanding to be served by Letty. She had 10 proposals of marriage, ranging in quality from the mayor's son to the lad who swept the streets, and she'd refused them all, saying she was too young to make up her mind just yet. I call that sensible of her, Sophie said to a bonnet she was pleating silk into. Fanny was pleased with this news. I knew she'd be all right, she said happily. It occurred to Sophie that Fanny was glad Letty was no longer around. Letty's bad for custom, she told the bonnet, pleating away at a mushroom-colored silk. She would make even you look glamorous, you dowdy old thing. Other ladies look at Letty and despair. That's such a dramatic line. I love it. Sophie talked to the hats more and more as weeks went by. There was no one else much to talk to. Fanny was out bargaining or trying to whip up custom much of the day, and Bessie was busy serving and telling everyone her wedding plans. Sophie got into the habit of putting each hat on its stand as she finished it, where it sat and looked almost like a head without a body, and pausing while she told the hat what the body under it ought to look like. She flattered the hats a bit, because you should flatter the customers. You have a mysterious allure, she told the one that was all veiling with hidden twinkles. To a wide creamy hat with roses under the brim, she said, You are going to have to marry money. And to a caterpillar green straw with curly green feather, she said, You are young as a spring leaf. She told pink bonnets they had dimpled charm, and smart hats trimmed with velvet that they were witty. She told the mushroom-pleated bonnet, You have a heart of gold, and someone in a high position will see it and fall in love with you. This was because she felt sorry for that particular bonnet. It looked so fussy and plain. Jane Ferrier came into the shop the next day and bought it. Her hair did look a little strange, Sophie thought, peeping out of her alcove, as if Jane had wound it round a row of pokers. It seemed a pity she had chosen that bonnet, but everyone seemed to be buying hats and bonnets around them. Maybe it was Fanny's sales talk, or maybe it was the spring coming on, but the hat trade was definitely picking up. Fanny began to say, a little guiltily, I think I shouldn't have been in such a hurry to get Martha and Letty placed out. At this rate, we might have managed. There was so much custom as April drew on towards May Day that Sophie had put on a demure gray dress and help in the shop too. But such was the demand that she had blah, blah. Ugh. I should really do more vocal warm-ups before I start this. But such was the demand that she was hard at trimming hats in between customers, and every evening she took them next door to the house, where she worked by lamplight far into the night in order to have hats to sell the next day. Caterpillar green hats like the one the mayor's wife had were much called for, and so were pink bonnets. Then, the week before May Day, someone came in and asked for the one with the mushroom pleats, just like the one Jane Ferrier had been wearing when she ran off with the Count of Cataract. That night, as she sewed, Sophie admitted to herself that her life was rather dull. Instead of talking to the hats, she tried each one on as she finished it and looked in the mirror. This was a mistake. The staid gray dress did not suit Sophie, particularly when her eyes were red rimmed with sewing, and since her hair was a reddish straw color, neither did calipeter green nor pink. The one with mushroom pleats simply made her look dreary. Like an old maid, said Sophie. Not that she wanted to race off with counts like Jane Ferrier, or even fancied half the town offering her marriage like Letty. But she wanted to do something. She was not sure what. She'd a bit more interest in it to it than simply trimming hats. She thought she would find time next day to go and talk to Letty. But she did not go. Either she could not find the time, or she could not find the energy, or it seemed a great distance to Market Square, or she remembered that on her own she was in danger from Wizard Howl. Anyway, every day it seemed more difficult to go and see her sister. It was very odd. Sophie had always thought she was nearly as strong-minded as Letty. Now she was finding that there were some things she could only do when there were no excuses left. This is absurd, Sophie said. Market Square is only 2 streets away. If I run... And she swore to herself that she would go around to Cesari's when the hat shop was closed for May Day. Meanwhile, a new piece of gossip came into the shop. The king had quarreled with his own brother, Prince Justin. It was said that the prince had gone into exile. Nobody quite knew the reason for the quarrel, but the prince had actually come through market shipping in disguise a couple of months back, and nobody had known. The Count of Cataract had been sent by the king to look for the prince when he happened to meet Jane Ferrier instead. Sophie listened and felt sad. Interesting things did seem to happen, but always to somebody else. Still, it would be nice to see Letty. May Day came, merrymaking filled the streets from dawn onward. Fanny went out early, but Sophie had a couple of hats to finish first. Sophie sang as she worked. After all, Letty was working too. Cesaria's was open till midnight on holidays. I shall buy one of their cream cakes, Sophie decided. I haven't had one for ages. She watched people crowding past the window in all kinds of bright clothes, people selling souvenirs, people walking on stilts, and felt really excited. But when she at last put a gray shawl over her gray dress and went out into the street, Sophie did not feel excited. She felt overwhelmed. There were too many people rushing past, laughing and shouting, far too much noise and jostling. Sophie felt as if for the past months of sitting and sewing had turned her into an old woman or a semi-invalid. I don't actually know what she means by that. I think I'll have to look that one up later, unless somebody in the chat knows what it means to be a semi-invalid. I mean, I'm assuming it just means somebody who just stays indoors and never leaves the house. But I'll look it up later. She gathered her shawl round her and crept along to the houses, trying to avoid being trodden on by people's best shoes or being jowed by elbows and trailing silk sleeves. When there came a sudden volley of bangs from overhead somewhere, Sophie thought she was going to faint. She looked up and saw Wizard Howl's castle right down on the hillside above the town. So near it seemed to be sitting on the chimneys. Blue flames were shooting out of all 4 of the castle's turrets, bringing balls of blue fire with them that exploded high into the sky, quite horrendously. Wizard Howl seemed to be offended by May Day. Maybe he was trying to join in his own fashion. Sophie was too terrified to care. She would have gone home, except that she was halfway to Cesari's by then, so she ran. What made me think I wanted life to be interesting? She asked as she ran. I'd be far too scared. It comes of being the eldest of 3. When she reached Market Square, it was worse. If possible, most of the inns were in the square. I read that wrong. When she reached Market Square, it was worse, if possible. Most of the inns were in the square. Some crowds of young men swaggered beerily to and fro, trailing cloaks and long sleeves and stamping buck-legged boots they would never have dreamed of wearing on a working day, calling loud remarks and accosting girls. The girls strolled in fine pairs, ready to be accosted. I don't I don't think anyone's ready to be accosted, quite frankly. Oh, invalid is like, huh. Interesting. That's not somewhat slower week. Huh. I'm not sure how I feel about how she used that then. This is quite an old book, though. Oh well, we'll move on. The girls strolled in fine pairs, ready to be accosted. It was perfectly normal for May Day, but Sophie was scared of that too. When a young man in a fantastical blue and silver costume spotted Sophie and decided to accost her as well, Sophie shrank into a shop doorway and tried to hide. The young man looked at her in surprise. "It's all right, you little gray mouse," he said, laughing rather pityingly. "I only want to buy you a drink. Don't look so scared." The pitying look made Sophie utterly ashamed. He was such a dashing specimen, too, with a bony, sophisticated face, really quite old, well into his 20s. That's not old. Well into your 20s isn't old. Oh. Really quite old, well into his 20s, and elaborate blonde hair. His sleeves trailed longer than any in the square, all scalloped his sleeves his sleeves trailed longer than any in the square, all scalloped edges and silver insets. "Oh, no thank you, if you please, sir," Sophie stammered. I'm on my way to see my sister." "Then by all means do so," laughed this advanced young man. You can't describe somebody as old and young at the... Am I understanding this wrong? Huh. That's interesting. So he's both old and young, I guess. Which I guess checks out, but... Who am I to keep a pretty young lady from her sister? Would you like me to go with you, since you seem so scared? He meant it kindly, which made Sophie more ashamed than ever. "No, thank you." She gasped and fled away past him. He wore perfume, too. The smell of hyacinths followed her as she ran. What a courtly person, Sophie thought, as she pushed her way between the little tables outside Cesari's. The tables were packed. Inside was packed and as noisy as the square. Sophie located Letty among the line of assistants at the counter because of the group of evident farmers' sons leaning their elbows on it to shout remarks to her. Letty, prettier than ever and perhaps a little thinner, was putting cakes into bags as fast as she could, giving each bag a deft little twist and looking back under her own elbow with a smile and an answer for each bag she twisted. There was a great deal of laughter. Sophie had to fight her way through to the counter. Letty saw her. She looked shaken for a moment, and then her eyes and her smile widened as she shouted, "Sophie! Can I talk to you?" Sophie yelled. "Somewhere," she shouted a little helplessly as a large, well-dressed elbow jostled her back from the counter. "Just a moment," Letty screamed back. She turned to the girl next to her and whispered. The girl nodded, grinned, and came to take Letty's place. You'll have to have me instead, she said to the crowd. Who's next? But I want to talk to you, Letty, one of the farmer's sons yelled. Talk to Carrie, Letty said. I want to talk to my sister. Nobody really seemed to mind. They jostled Sophie along to the end of the counter, where Letty held up a flap and beckoned, and told her not to keep Letty all day. When Sophie had edged through the flap, Letty seized her wrist and dragged her into the back of the shop to a room surrounded by rack upon wooden rack, each one filled with rows of cakes. Letty pulled forward two stools. Sit down, she said, and looked in the nearest rack in an absent-minded way, and handed Sophie a cream cake out of it. You may need this, she said. Sophie sank into the stool, breathing the rich smell of cake and feeling a little tearful. Oh, Letty, she said, I'm so glad to see you. Yes, and I'm glad you're sitting down, said Letty. You see, I'm not Letty, I'm Martha. And that's the end of the first chapter. I'm going to take a little break to get my voice to rest for a hot second. I'm going to drink some of my tea, too. But, yeah. So, if you guys haven't read this yet, but you have seen the movie, it is quite a bit different, but it has the same energy, if that makes sense, which is something that I really appreciate. But, yeah. Oh, we've already been streaming for an hour. Dang. That's so long. Okay, this next chapter is about 22 more pages. I think we should be able to do, what, one more chapter? Yeah, does that sound okay with you guys? I'm gonna take that as a yes. I'm just gonna go ahead and read the second chapter. And then tomorrow we can do an illustration for one of these two chapters and then work on some character design, which will be fun. Chapter 2, in which Sophie is compelled to seek her fortune. What? Sophie stared at the girl on the stool opposite of her. She looked just like Letty. She was wearing Letty's second-best blue dress, a wonderful blue that suited her perfectly. She had Letty's dark hair and blue eyes. I am Martha, said her sister. Who did you catch cutting up Letty's silk drawers? I never told Letty that, did you? No, said Sophie, quite stunned. She could see it was Martha now. There was Martha's tilt to Letty's head, and Martha's way of clasping her hands around her knees with her thumbs twiddling. Why? I've been dreading you coming to see me, Martha said, because I knew I'd have to tell you. It's a relief now I have. Promise you won't tell anyone. I know you won't tell if you promise. You're so honorable. I promise, Sophie said. But why? How? Letty and I arranged it, Martha said, twiddling her thumbs. Because Letty wanted to learn witchcraft and I didn't. Letty's got brains and she wants a future where she can use them. Only try telling that to Mother. Mother's too jealous of Letty even to admit she has brains. Sophie could not believe Fanny was like that, but she let it pass. But what about you? Eat your cake, said Martha. It's good. Oh, yes, I can be clever too. It only took me 2 weeks at Miss Fairfax's to find the spell we're using. I got up at night and read her book secretly. And it was really easy. Then I asked her if I could visit my family, and Miss Fairfax said yes. She's a dear. She thought I was homesick. So I took the spell and came here, and Letty went back to Miss Fairfax pretending to be me. The difficult part was the first week when I didn't know all the things I was supposed to know. It was awful, but I discovered that people like me. They do, you know, if you like them. And then it was all right. And Miss Fairfax hasn't kicked Letty out, so I suppose she's managed to. Sophie chomped at the cake she was not really tasting. But what made you want to do this? Martha rocked on her stool, grinning all over Letty's face, twirling her thumbs in a happy pink whirl. I want to get married and have 10 children. You're not old enough, said Sophie. Not quite, Martha agreed. But you can see I've got to start quite soon in order to fit 10 children in. And this way it gives me time to wait and see if the person I want likes me for being me. The spell's going to wear off gradually, and I shall get more and more like myself. Sophie was so astonished that she finished her cake without noticing what kind it had been. Why 10 children? Because that's how many I want, said Martha. I never knew. Well, it wasn't much good going on about it when you were so busy backing Mother up about me making my fortune, Martha said. You thought Mother meant it. I did too, until Father died and I saw she was just trying to get rid of us, putting Letty where she knows she was bound to meet a lot of men and get married off, and sending me as far away as she could. I was so angry I thought, why not? I spoke to Letty, and she was just as angry, and we fixed it up. You're fine now. We're fine now. But we both feel bad about you. You're far too clever and nice to be stuck in that shop for the rest of your life. We talked about it, but we couldn't see what to do. I'm all right, Sophie protested. Just a bit dull. All right, Martha exclaimed. Yes, you prove you're all right by not coming here for months, and then turning up in a frightful gray dress and shawl, looking as if even I scare you. What's Mother been doing to you? Nothing, Sophie said uncomfortably. We've been rather busy. You shouldn't talk about Fanny that way, Martha. She is your mother. Yes, and I'm enough like her to understand her, Martha retorted. That's why she sent me far away, or tried to. Mother knows you don't have to be unkind to someone in order to exploit them. She knows how dutiful you are. She knows you have this thing about being a failure because you're the eldest. She's managed you perfectly and got you slaving away for her. I bet she doesn't pay you. I'm still an apprentice, Sophie protested. So am I, but I get a wage. The Cesares know I'm worth it, said Martha. That hat shop is making a mint these days. All because of you. You made that green hat that makes the mayor's wife look like a stunning schoolgirl, didn't you? Caterpillar green. I trimmed it, said Sophie. And the bonnet Jane Ferrier was wearing when she met that nobleman? Martha swept on. You're a genius with hats and clothes, and Mother knows it. You sealed your fate when you made Letty that outfit last May Day. Now you earn the money while she goes off gadding. She's out doing the buying, Sophie said. Buying? Martha cried, her thumbs whirled. That takes her half a morning. I've seen her, Sophie, and heard the talk. She's off on a hired carriage and new clothes on your earnings, visiting all the mansions down the valley. They're saying she's going to buy that big place down at Vale End and set up in style. And where are you? Well, Fanny's entitled to some pleasure after all her hard work bringing us up, Sophie said. I suppose I'll inherit the shop. What a fate, Martha exclaimed. Listen. But at that moment, two empty cake racks were pulled away at the other end of the room, and an apprentice stuck his head through from the back somewhere. I thought I heard your voice, Letty, he said, grinning in the most friendly and flirtatious way. The new baking's just up, tell them. His head, curly and somewhat floury, disappeared again. Sophie thought he had looked like a nice lad. She longed to ask if he was the one that Martha really liked, but she did not get the chance. Martha sprang up in a hurry, still talking. Hi, Howl. What are you doing, silly? Sorry, that's my cat. Hi, baby boy. But she did not get the chance. Martha sprang up in a hurry, still talking. I must get the girls to carry all these I must get the girls to carry all these to the shops, she said. Help me with the end of this one. He was named after this. And if you get into Solomon's Food Bowl again, I'm not going to do anything, but I'll be upset. Boop. Help me with the end of this one. She dragged out the nearest rack, and Sophie helped her hump it past the door into the roaring, busy shop. You must do something about yourself, Sophie, Martha panted as they went. Letty kept saying she didn't know what would happen to you when we weren't around to give you some self-respect. She was right to be worried. Oh, hi, I'm not feeding you again. You already had dinner. Do you want to come up? Sorry, give me 1 second. No, you want food again. He already had dinner. He already ate. He had breakfast and dinner. You ate twice today. Stinky little man. In the shop, Mrs. Ari seized the rack from them and both massive arms yelling instructions, and a line of people rushed away past Martha to fetch more. Sophie yelled goodbye and slipped away in the bustle. It did not seem right to take up more of Martha's time. Besides, she wanted to be alone to think. She ran home. There were fireworks now going up from the field by the river where the fair was, competing with the blue bangs from Howl's castle. Sophie felt more like an invalid than ever. She thought and thought most of the following week, and all that happened was that she became confused and discontented. Things just did not seem the way they ought. Things just did not seem to be the way that she thought they were. She was amazed at Lydia and Martha. She had misunderstood them for years, but she could not believe Fanny was the kind of woman Martha said. There was a lot of time for thinking, because Bessie duly left to be married, and Sophie was mostly alone in the shop. Fanny did seem to be out of lot, gadding or not, and trade was slack after May Day. After 3 days, Sophie plucked up the courage to ask Fanny, "Shouldn't I be earning a wage?" "Of course, my love, with all you do," Fanny answered warmly, fixing on a rose-trimmed hat in front of the shop mirror. "We'll see about it as soon as I've done the accounts this evening." Then she went out and did not come back until Sophie had shut the shop and taken that day's hats through to the house to trim. Sophie at first felt mean to have listened to Martha, but when Fanny did not mention a wage either that evening or any time later that week, Sophie began to think that Martha had been right. Maybe I am being exploited, she told a hat that she was trimming with a red silk and a bunch of wax cherries. But someone has to do this or there will be no hats at all to sell. She finished that hat and started on a stark black and white one, very modish, and a quite new thought came to her. Does it matter if there are no hats to sell? She asked it. She looked around at the assembled hats, on stands or waiting in a heap to be trimmed. What good are you all? She asked them. You certainly aren't doing me a scrap of good. And she was within an ace of leaving the house and setting out to seek her fortune, until she remembered that she was the eldest and there was no point. She took up the hat again, sighing. She was still discontented, alone in the shop next morning, when a very plain young woman customer stormed in, whirling a pleated mushroom bonnet by its ribbons. "Look at this!" the young lady shrieked. "You told me this was the same as the bonnet Jane Ferrier was wearing when she met the Count, and you lied. Nothing has happened to me at all." "I'm not surprised," Sophie said before she had caught up with herself. "If you're fool enough to wear a bonnet..." I forgot about this part. "I'm not surprised," Sophie said before she had caught up with herself. If you're fool enough to wear a hat with a bonnet If you're fool enough to wear that bonnet with a face like that, you wouldn't have to wait to spot the king himself if he came begging, if he hadn't turned to stone just Stone first, just the side of you. Get her, Sophie! uh, I freaking love Sophie. Um, the customer glared. Then she threw the bonnet at Sophie and stormed out of the shop. Sophie carefully crammed the bonnet into the wastebasket, panting rather. The rule was, lose your temper, lose a customer, and she had just proven that rule. It troubled her to realize how very enjoyable it had been. Get her ass, Sophie. Sophie had no time to recover. There was the sound of wheels and horse hooves, and a carriage darkened the window. The shop bell clanged, and the grandest customer she had ever seen sailed in, with a sable wrap drooping from her shoulders and diamonds wrinkling all over her dense black dress. Sophie's eyes went to the lady's wide hat first. Real ostrich plume dyed to reflect the pinks and greens and blues winking in the diamonds, and yet still looked black. It was a wealthy hat. The lady's face was carefully beautiful. The chestnut brown hair made her seem young, but Sophie's eyes took in the young man who followed the lady in. A slightly formless-faced person with reddish hair, quite well dressed, but pale and obviously upset. He stared at Sophie with a kind of beseeching horror. He was clearly younger than the lady. Sophie was puzzled. "Miss Hatter?" the lady asked in a musical but commanding voice. "Yes," said Sophie. The man looked more upset than ever. Perhaps this lady was his mother. "I hear you sell the most heavenly hats," said the lady. "Show me." Sophie did not trust herself to answer in her present mood. She went out and got hats. None of them were in this lady's class, but she could feel the man's eyes following her, and that made her uncomfortable. The sooner this lady discovered that the hats were wrong for her, the sooner this odd pair would go. She followed Fanny's advice and got out the wrongest first. The lady began rejecting hats instantly. "Dimples," she said to the pink bonnet, and "youth" to the green caterpillar one. To the one with twinkles and veils she said, "Mysterious allure, how very obvious. What else have you?" Sophie got out the modish black and white, which was the only hat even remotely likely to interest this lady. The lady looked at it with contempt. "This one doesn't do anything for anybody. You're wasting my time, Miss Hatter." "Only because you came in and asked for hats," Sophie said. "This is only a small shop in a small town, ma'am. Why did you—" Behind the lady, the man gasped and seemed to be trying to signal warningly. "Bother to come in," Sophie finished, wondering what was going on. "I always bother when somebody tries to set themselves up against the Witch of the Waste," said the lady. "I've heard of you, Miss Hatter, and I don't care for your competition or your attitude. I came to put a stop to you. There." She spread out her hand in a flinging motion towards Sophie's face. "You mean you're the Witch of the Waste?" Sophie quavered. Her voice seemed to have gone strange with fear and astonishment. "I am," said the lady, "and let that teach you to meddle with the things that belong to me." "I don't think I did. There must be some mistake," Sophie croaked. The man was now staring at her in utter horror, though she could not see why. "No mistake, Miss Hatter," said the witch. "Come, Gaston." She turned and swept to the shop door. While the man was humbly opening it for her, she turned back to Sophie. "By the way, you won't be able to tell anyone that you're under a spell," she said. The shop door tolled like a funeral bell as she left. I love that wording, that imagery there. That was a good line. I like that. Sophie put her hand to her face, wondering what the man had stared at. She felt soft, leathery wrinkles. She looked at her hands. They were wrinkled too, and skinny, with large veins in the back, and knuckles like knobs. She pulled her gray skirt against her legs and looked down at skinny, decrepit ankles and feet, which made her shoes all knobby. They were the legs of someone about 90, and they seemed to be real. Sophie got herself to the mirror and found she had to hobble. The face in the mirror was quite calm, because it was what she expected to see. It was the face of a gaunt old woman, withered and brownish, surrounded by wispy white hair. Her own eyes, yellow and watery, stared out at her, looking rather tragic. Don't worry, old thing, Sophie said to the face. You look quite healthy. Besides, this is much more like you really are. She thought about her situation quite calmly. Everything seemed to have gone calm and remote. She was not even particularly angry with the Witch of the Waste. Well, of course I shall have to do for her. Well, of course I shall have to do for her when I get the chance, she told herself. But meanwhile, if Letty and Martha can stand being one another, I can stand being like this. But I can't stay here. Fanny would have a fit. Let's see. This grey dress is quite suitable, but I shall need my shawl and some food. She hobbled over to the shop door and carefully put up the clothes notice. Her joints cracked as she moved. Me too, homie. She had to walk bowed and slow, but she was relieved to discover that she was quite a hale old woman. She did not feel weak or ill, just stiff. She hobbled to collect her shawl and wrapped it over her head and shoulders, as old women did. And when she shuffled through the house, where she collected her purse and a few coins in it, and a parcel of bread and cheese, she let herself out of the house, carefully hiding the key in the usual place, and hobbled away down the street, surprised at how calm she felt. She did wonder if she could say goodbye to Martha, but she did not like the idea of Martha not knowing her. It was best to just go. Sophie decided that she would write to both her sisters when she got wherever she was going and shuffled on. Through the field where the fair had been, over the bridge and on the country lanes beyond, it was a warm spring day. Sophie discovered that being a crone did not stop her enjoying the sight and smell of May in the hedgerows. Though the sight was a little blurred, her back began to ache. She hobbled sturdily enough, but she needed a stick. She searched the hedges as she went. Oh. Oh, shoot. Sorry, guys, my face tracker just died. By that, I mean my phone. It was charged before this, I swear. Well, when I said there'd be scuff this stream, I wasn't kidding. Give me 1 second. Okay. Looks like it's gonna be dead for a bit. The mouth is still moving because it's attached to my audio. But yeah, this is certainly a look for me, huh? I'm just gonna keep reading. I'm gonna finish this chapter. It's almost done. And then try to fix that. Oh, thanks. She hobbled sturdily enough, but she needed a stick. She searched the hedges as she went for a loose stake of some kind. Evidently, her eyes were not as good as they had been. She thought she saw a stick a mile on or so, but when she hauled on it, it proved to be the bottom end of an old scarecrow that someone had thrown out into the hedge. Sophie heaved the thing upright. It had a withered turnip for a face. Sophie found she had some fellow feeling for it. Instead of pulling it to pieces and taking the stick, she stuck it between two branches of the hedge, so that it stood looming rakishly above the May, with the tattered sleeves on its stick arms fluttering over the hedge. "There," she said in her cracked old voice, surprised her into giving a cracked old cackle of a laughter. "Neither of us are up to much, are we, my friend? Maybe you'll get back to your field if I leave you where people can see you." She set off up the lane again, but the thought shook her head and she turned back. "Now, if I wasn't doomed to failure because of my position in the family," she told the scarecrow, "you could come to life and offer me help in making my fortune. But I wish you luck anyway." She cackled again as she walked on. Perhaps she was a little mad, but then old women often were. She found a stick an hour or so later when she sat down on the bank to rest and eat her bread and cheese. There were noises in the hedge behind her, little strangled squeakings, followed by heavings that shook many petals off the hedge. Sophie crawled on her bony knees to peer past leaves and flowers and thorns into the inside of a hedge, and discovered a thin gray dog in there. It was hopelessly trapped by a stout stick which had somehow got twisted into a rope that was tied around its neck. The stick had wedged itself between two branches of the hedge so that the dog could barely move. It rolled its eyes wildly at Sophie's peering face. As a girl, Sophie was scared of all dogs. Even as an old woman, she was quite alarmed by the 2 rows of white fangs in the creature's open jaws. But she said to herself, "The way I am now, it's scarcely worth worrying about," and felt in her sewing pocket for her scissors. She reached in the hedge with the scissors and sawed away at the rope around the dog's neck. The dog was very wild. It flinched away from her and growled, but Sophie sawed bravely on. "You'll starve or throttle to death, my friend," she told the dog in her cracked old voice, "unless you let me cut you loose. In fact, I think someone has tried to throttle you already. Maybe that counts for your wildness." The rope had been tied quite tightly around the dog's neck, and the stick had been twisted viciously into it. It took a lot of sawing before the rope parted and the dog was able to drag itself out from under the stick. "Would you like some bread and cheese?" Sophie asked it then, but the dog just growled at her, forced its way through the opposite side of the hedge, and slunk away. "But there's gratitude for you," Sophie said, rubbing her prickled arms. "But you left me a gift in spite of yourself." She pulled the stick that had trapped the dog She pulled the stick that had trapped the dog out of the hedge and found it was a proper walking stick, well trimmed and tipped with iron. Sophie finished her bread and cheese and set off walking again. The lane became steeper and steeper until she found the stick a great help. It was also something to talk to. Sophie thumped along with a will, chatting to her stick. After all, old people often talk to themselves. "There's 2 encounters," she said, "and not a scrap of magical gratitude from either. Still, you're a good stick. I'm not grumbling. But I'm surely due to have a 3rd encounter, magical or not. In fact, I insist on one. I wonder what it will be." I'm, almost going into my Pappy voice. I don't mean to do that. The 3rd encounter came toward the end of the afternoon when Sophie had worked her way quite high into the hills. A countryman came whistling down the lane towards her. A shepherd, Sophie thought, going home after seeing to his sheep. He was a well set up... Oh, sorry, I guess I'm getting a little tired. a well-set-up young fellow of 40 or so. Gracious, Sophie said to herself. This morning I'd have seen him as an old man. How is one point of view does alter. When the shepherd saw Sophie mumbling to herself, he moved rather carefully over to the other side of the lane and called out with great heartiness, "Good evening, good evening to you, mother. Where are you off to?" "Mother?" said Sophie. "I'm not your mother, young man." "A manner of speaking," the shepherd said, edging along against the opposite hedge. "I was only meaning a polite inquiry, seeing you walking into the hills at the end of the day. You won't get down into Upper Folding before nightfall, will you?" Sophie had not considered this. She stood in the road and thought about it. "Doesn't matter, really," she said to herself. "You can't be fussy when you're off to seek your fortune." "Can't you indeed, mother?" said the shepherd. He had now edged himself downhill of Sophie and seemed to feel better for it. "Then I wish you good luck, mother, provide your fortune don't have nothing to do with charming folks' cattle." And he took off down the road in great strides, almost running, but not quite. Sophie stared after him indignantly. "He thought I was a witch," she said to her stick. She had half a mind to scare the shepherd by shouting nasty things after him, but that seemed a little unkind. She plugged on uphill, mumbling. Shortly the hedges gave way to bare banks, and the land beyond came heathery upland, with a lot of steepness beyond that covered with yellow rattling grass. Sophie kept grimly on. By now her knobby old feet ached, and her back and her knees. She became too tired to mumble and simply plugged on, panting until the sun was quite low. And all at once it became quite clear to Sophie that she could not walk a step further. She collapsed into a stone by the wayside, wondering what she would do now. "The only fortune I can think of is a comfortable chair," she gasped. That's such a fat mood. Okay, I'm checking. Okay, give me 1 second. I'm gonna see if I can get the tracking up and going again. Oh! Look at that. She plugged on uphill, mumbling. Shortly the hedges gave way to bare banks, and the land beyond became heathery upland. Oh, I already read that part. She collapsed onto a stone by the wayside, wondering what she will do now. "The only fortune I can think of is a comfortable chair," she gasped. The stone proved to be on a sort of headland, which gave Sophie a magnificent view of the way she had come. There was most of the valley spread out beneath her in the setting sun, all fields and walls and hedges, the windings of a river, and the fine mansions of rich people glowing out from clumps of trees. Right down to the blue mountains in the far distance, just below her, was Market Chipping. Sophie could look down into its well-known streets. There was Market Square and Cesari's. She could have tossed a stone down the chimney pots of one of the houses next to the hat shop. "How near it still is," Sophie told her stick in dismay. "All that walking just to get above my own rooftop." It got cold on the stone as the sun went down. An unpleasant wind blew whichever way Sophie turned to avoid it. Now it no longer seemed so unimportant that she would be out on the hills during the night. She found herself thinking more and more of a comfortable chair and a fireside, and also of darkness and wild animals. But if she went back to Market Chipping, it would be the middle of the night before she got there. She might as well just go on. She sighed and stood up, creaking. It was awful. She ached all over. I never realized before what old people had to put up with, she panted as she labored uphill. Still, I don't think wolves will eat me. I must be far too dry and tough. That's one comfort. Night was coming down fast now, and the heathery uplands were blue-gray. The wind was sharper. Sophie's panting and the creaking of her limbs were so loud in her ears that it took her a while to notice that some of the grinding and puffing was not coming from herself at all. She looked up blurrily. Wizard Howl's castle was rumbling and bumping towards her across the moorland. Black smoke was blowing up in clouds from behind its black battlements. It looked tall and thin and heavy and ugly and very sinister indeed. Sophie leaned on her stick and watched it. She was not particularly frightened. She wondered how it moved. But the main thing in her mind was that all the smoke must mean a large fireside somewhere inside those tall black walls. Well, why not? She said to her stick. Wizard Howl is not likely to want my soul for his collection. He only takes young girls. She raised her stick and waved it imperiously at the castle. Stop! She shrieked. The castle obediently came to a rumbling, grinding halt about 50 feet uphill from her. Sophie felt rather gratified as she hobbled toward it. And that is the end of chapter 2. I will leave in a little bookmark. I'm just going to use this as a bookmark. What I'm using right now isn't actually a bookmark. It's an embroidery piece that I'm working on, but I don't have an actual bookmark around me, so we're just using that instead. I don't dog-ear my books. I am not a monster. Well, I mean, you know what I mean. Let's see if I can get that to stay. Cool. Okay, so that's it for chapter 2. I think we're gonna go ahead and stop there. But yeah, I'd love to know how you guys are feeling about this book so far. I'm very much enjoying it. Wait, do you actually dog ear your books? I'll strangle you. I will actually come over to your house. I swear to God. Don't dog ear your books. Heckin' geckos, I know where you live. I will come over. Don't test me. Um, but yeah. Anyway, that's the first 2 chapters of Howl's Moving Castle. Your Harry Potter copy? Okay, well, if it's Harry Potter, that's fine. They're not good. I have a feeling I try very hard not to be a book snob. J.K. Rowling can suck my ass. I'm trying to get better about the book snob thing. J.K. Rowling still sucks, though. We can dog ear her books. But yeah. That's the first 2 chapters. Oh, no. Stay put, please. That's the first 2 chapters of Howl's Moving Castle. I'm a bit out of breath. I'm getting a bit of a sore throat, so I won't be able to actually talk about the first 2 chapters very much. But we can talk about that tomorrow. I'll be streaming. I'll be live again, 4 p.m. tomorrow to work on some character design. We're probably going to be focusing on. You ate the paper? god. Thank you for being here. Oh, that's. Oh my god. Oh my god. Okay. Tomorrow we'll work on Sophie's design, and we may get into Letty and Martha, possibly. Uh, no, dude, it's amazing. You're great. You're fantastic. Don't worry. Don't. You're doing great. Um, but yeah, we might get into some like Letty, Martha, and Fanny design. We'll be seeing a bit more of them, but we're probably just gonna focus on Sophie for now. Especially since Sophie's gonna have two designs, like one as her younger self and then one as her older self. And I have a few ideas for how I want to kind of like communicate the way that her character develops, like with her age. Um, but yeah, thank you guys so much for showing up to my stream. Uh, this is my first one. It was very exciting. Yeah. Um, I'm gonna go ahead and send you guys on a raid. I'll see who is streaming right now. For those of you who don't know what a raid is, um, when somebody is done streaming, uh, they will take like themselves and then everybody currently viewing that stream over to another stream as a way to kind of help each other out. You don't have to stay for the whole thing. Um, but staying for part of it at the very least does kind of help out just a bit. Just give me 1 second. It's in here somewhere. There it is. Oh, hey, look at that. Lovelesian is streaming right now. They're playing Truck Simulator. They're really cool. I'm sure you guys will like them. But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and start that raid. And thank you so much for showing up. I'll see you guys tomorrow, hopefully. Thank you again. Bye.